going on, guys? Jake Peffer here. Welcome back to the channel. I have finally gotten to the end of my Scream recap and reviews with Scream 6, the latest in the franchise. I'm joined by my good friend, Mr. Mark Mistretts. And we're going to be talking about the movie today that's been killing it at the box office, no pun intended. Yeah, this was a solid movie. We actually got to see it together last weekend, opening weekend for that matter. And I think we both pretty much enjoyed it. I think I had a good time. I think you had a good time as well. So we're just going to get into the movie and talk about it. This will have some spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie at this point, definitely check it out before listening, because we're going to probably get a little in depth with some of the stuff that happens in this movie. So, like I said, I enjoyed it. Mark, how'd you feel about it?
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was great. I mean, I really enjoyed the originality of this one, the changing of the rules, so to speak, as they described it, realizing that they're now in a franchise within itself, which is interesting to think about. But yeah, going beyond the new requel rules that were already set in the last movie, I thought it was pretty interesting, and again really made it fresh and I think really original, putting this one for me up there with the first and second one as far as rating wise.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same boat. I really liked the one that came out last year. I thought it was a good requel, legacy sequel, whatever you want to call it. But it did a good job creating new characters, but still paying homage to like the originals and everything. And this one actually feels the most different, I think, because like you said, it changes the rules. We're in a whole new area. We're in New York now, so it's a different kind of playing field, and it just adds a little bit more to the atmosphere and to the franchise itself as a whole. But yeah, I think overall, even like with the beginning of this movie, this is the first opening sequence that's completely different than all the other ones, because you start out with a character that ends up getting killed, just like pretty much all the other ones. But then the killer actually reveals who they are, and then from there we follow the killer. So for a minute you're thinking like, oh, this is completely different, but then it ends up kind of following suit and we get the actual killer that comes in. But I thought that was an interesting way to start things off and kind of make things different than what we've seen before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was in the same boat. Again, seeing that unfold there, I wasn't sure what to expect from that point moving forward. I was really like, okay, this is definitely changing the formula quite a bit. And while it did kind of revert back there after that kind of intro aspect of essentially going back to the killer being unknown, but yeah, I mean, it definitely was very interesting. And, as you were saying, the cast, especially the core four, as they're now called, that they introduced starting with the last movie and this movie. I mean, they really make it enjoyable. And I think, again, them alone just elevating the film and where I see it fitting in the rankings with all of the Scream movies, again being up there at the top 3 in my book. But and I found what you said after we saw the movie pretty interesting. You said, don't quote me, but exactly how you said it, but essentially you were talking about how they played it safe with only knocking off the new characters. And I definitely think, again, the relationship among that core four, as I was just talking about, making the film so great, being a large part of their plot armor. But yeah, so I think, yeah, I definitely found a lot of that interesting, same as you.
Yeah, and that's another part of it I was wanting to get into, is definitely it does feel like it played a little bit safe, because you have these characters you're bringing back from the last one, and most of them should have probably been killed off, but then they end up surviving in the end. And I don't hate it, because I actually like this group of characters. This is a nice change of pace from like part four, where you had a whole new group of kids and then they just killed them all off, with the exception of Hayden Panettiere's character, who does return in this movie, who I enjoyed seeing once again. But that's, I think, what I liked about the previous movie is you had a group of new kids, but it left a lot of them there where they could continue into this sequel. And now I'm assuming they're going to be in part 7 when that inevitably comes out. So it's nice to have this core group that, like you said, they're calling the core 4. So it'll be interesting to see how they play out, because are they going to do the same thing in the next one? Just, bring in some new characters and then just kill them off and continue on? Or are we actually going to get some stakes and see one of these characters actually get killed off and it having some emotion, maybe? Because the other part of this movie that's interesting is this is the first one without Nev Campbell's character, Sydney. And honestly, it didn't feel like she was really missing from this. Actually, as much as I would have liked to seen her in it, I don't think her absence hurts the movie in any way. If anything, it actually almost makes it better. It makes the movie breathe a little easier, because it's not having to go back and focus on Sydney. Because in part 5, that's kind of the only gripe I had with it, is you're introducing all these new kids, but you're still focusing some attention on Sydney, despite her not being in that movie too much. So I think her actually being out of this movie helped make the movie a little bit better, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Coming into it, I was the same, thinking like it's going to be weird. This is her franchise essentially. Weird that being the first one that she wasn't in, but yeah, I agree that she, I think it made sense how she was, I guess, explained or written off, so to speak, into the movie. Talking about her deserving her happy ending. I also found
I did like that.
I liked it, and I think it makes perfect sense. I also found it like, I don't know, maybe this is me reading into it a little bit more, but just given the realities kind of behind the scenes with the salary dispute, I found it ironic as well, deserving her happy ending, because I'm
Right.
not too happy. About that. But no, I you said it pretty well. I think it just makes room for the new cast, not being reliant on the legacy characters there. And I agree. I think Hayden's character is a happy return, and I think that can actually be consistency moving forward, as far as like having legacy character, so to speak, but in a way that fits in real nice. So her new role with the FBI, she can essentially be the connection amongst, however they decide to move forward with the future installments, but essentially be the connection amongst all the investigations for Ghostface moving forward. So I think that there's a lot of potential to be interesting there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I was kind of thrown off when they said she was in the FBI, because I was like, wow, that's kind of a weird way to go, but it ended up playing out pretty well, I thought. But with her character, and actually Courtney Cox's character, who's been in all these movies, she's the only one now officially who's been in every single screen, not including the guy that does the voice, who is back again, and he's awesome once again. But it's interesting with both of them too, because again, they're two characters that probably should have died based on how things play out in this movie, and they're still here. And again, not hating it by any means, but it's just with Gail in particular, I feel like she almost could have been out of this movie as well, and it wouldn't hurt the movie. She does have one really good scene, which is her a scene where she gets attacked, and I thought that was one of the better action sequences of the movie, because she plays it off very well. And the only thing I was kind of disappointed with her character is they do confirm that she's still alive, but they never go back to her at any point toward the end of the movie, which I thought was kind of weird. But maybe she wasn't available to finish like some shooting or something. I don't know, but I did find that a little odd. But outside of that, I do think both of them work well in the movie, as well as the rest of the cast. I mean, the cast here is pretty, they're all pretty great. You do have some new faces who work and some don't work, and I'll probably get into that here in a little bit. But the returning core 4 All of them are great. I think they do a good job, and it's nice to see a group of kids in this series be memorable versus or going back to like the original movie where you had a group of kids that were all memorable. They all had um, different personalities that was nice to see. They weren't all just blending in together, which is the biggest problem I have with part four. Is a lot of those characters just didn't really get fleshed out and never really seemed to care for many of them. But yeah, I mean, I think overall everybody here is doing a good job, and it's nice to see that a franchise like this can still have consistency in its actors and actresses all the way up until the sixth movie.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and especially this one. I mean, they did spend, I think, a fair amount of time with character building, and again, and just improving upon the characters that already exist, especially again with that core four. And I go back to it's actually interesting because what we mentioned earlier about playing safe with these characters, and of course them all surviving the end there. But what is interesting, which is also what we talked about, is or at least briefly hit on, is the action sequences and the tension. I mean, with some of these characters like really thinking, okay, this might be it for them. And there was, while being safe with these characters definitely have had more the only word coming to mind at the moment is trauma, like more just action sequences happening to them as opposed to the characters of the original cast, Scream 1, for example. Like I think in this particular one, there was a lot of times where I'm sitting there wondering, okay, how are they going to make it out of this alive? Like I was seriously considering, okay, who is not going to make it? Who is going to make it at the end of this movie? Whereas, the first one, it was less so. Like, they not as, I guess, the edge of my seat wondering if that person's going to survive this encounter. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting that while they played it safe, there was definitely the ability to keep you at the edge of your seat, thinking that it wasn't going to be safe for all of these characters.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely agree on that. I think it's interesting because, like you said, with the action sequences and everything, the tension is ramped up pretty high in this. But what's nice and different with this entry versus a lot of the other ones is during those action sequences when Ghostface is trying to, kill whoever it might be, it's not a lot of just one-off. It's not a lot of just characters by themselves getting attacked. There's actually a lot of moments where it's all of the group or it's multiple characters getting attacked all at once. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's a nice change of pace for any slasher movie, because generally it's just you have one character, they go off by themselves because they get split up from the group and inevitably they probably get killed. But here you actually have the group all working together to try to get out, or you have at least two characters together, like that scene where the main characters, Sam and Tara, they end up going into the convenience store and Ghostface chases them in there and ends up pulling out or grabbing a shotgun from the guy that owns the store. Like that scene is very intense because it's so different and it's not something you're generally used to seeing, not only in a Scream movie, but just in a slasher movie in general. I like the aspect of this movie, not only ramping up the brutality, ramping up the gore and things like that, but also doing things differently than what you typically see in most horror movies. That was just a nice change of pace.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, just and especially that scene that you were just talking about, the convenience store. I mean, the just sheer audacity of it just being right there in public, and then all these people that are just coming in to encounter this scene, not making it to the end of it. But yeah, definitely, a change of pace from again, just the characters wandering off alone to in public, and a lot more brutality. Yeah. As you get, being in New York now, being in the city.
Yeah, how did you feel about the change to New York? Me personally, I kind of liked it. I thought that it added a little bit more to things, and it opened it up to almost a bigger world instead of it all being secluded to just their small town. But I actually liked the change to the big city.
Yeah, I agree. I think it like was done perfectly. That was definitely one of my hesitations coming into it. Not that it's not the first one that was done outside of Woodsboro, but again,
True. Yeah.
the first one that's in a major city, like that is, not being able to just wander off again, as we were just talking about. So definitely was interested coming into the movie how that would play out, but I think it played out perfectly and it fit in so well with, again, just all of the brutality for this movie. I mean, that really could only be done because of the crowded spaces of New York, of being in the city.
Yeah, definitely. No, I absolutely agree there. So since we're talking spoilers, let's get into the final reveal of this movie, because this is probably the only part of the movie that I thought was lacking a little bit. I wasn't overly thrilled with who ended up being the killers in this one. Um, I guess just because of how the movie was marketed, and if you read into stuff on, social media and stuff, there's all these speculations about, oh, are they going to bring back, a character from a previous movie to be Ghostface and yada yada yada, all that kind of stuff. But for it to be so in this, we didn't really mention, but in this particular movie, you have a police detective who's played by Dermot Mulroney. He has a daughter that gets killed early on in the movie, and then he had a son that also was killed as well. But then it's revealed at the end that one of the other characters in the group of kids is his other son, and then his daughter ends up not being killed. And I don't know, it felt like a lot all at once, because it's like, hey, not only is this kid his other son, but then his daughter that we saw get killed didn't really die, but then also his son that is dead is the character Richie, who was Ghostface in the last movie. So I do kind of like that they tied it all in, that it's a parent of a previous Ghostface, because that's actually, the original part two, it ended up being Billy Loomis's mom as one of the Ghostface killers. So they're kind of playing into that as, the requel rules play out, as, they're basically kind of redoing the original sequel. But I don't know, those characters to me just didn't really come off all that menacing. And I don't know how I really feel about them being the Ghostface, because a lot of the kills, like we've talked about, have been real brutal and almost kind of diabolic in certain aspects. And these two kids that they have playing Ghostface just don't really strike me as the type of people that would be, performing those type of murders. But I don't know. It's not the worst reveal in all of this franchise, but to me, it almost kind of hit with a thud. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, no, again, I would agree. Really, I mean, I don't know if I have too much to add. I'm kind of in the same boat where it was just like it wasn't it wasn't what I was really expecting, I guess. I didn't know what to expect by that point. I didn't come into the movie like guessing who it was going to be. But by that point, I was not expecting it to be them. And when it was them, I mean, I guess I was indifferent. I wasn't like, oh man, it's them, or, but yeah, I was just kind of like, um, yeah, I don't really have like much to say as far as like them being a memorable choice, like moving forward. Like, once another three movies come out, I'm not really going to be thinking about, I guess, these characters as Ghostface much. I don't think they just didn't bring much. I think connecting the dots was, I don't know if forced is the right word, but, again, they kind of stretched it a little bit from, how they're going to make that connection. And, I just, yeah, I don't think it was great. I don't think it was awful.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same area. I mean, at the very least, if anything, like you said, I was not expecting it to be them, so it is kind of a surprise, but it's almost like a disappointing surprise, because I was hoping it would be something better. But it's not, like I said, it's not the worst thing in the world, so it's just kind of there. But yeah, I think we kind of hit everything for the most part. Do you have any final thoughts as far as Scream Six? What you just kind of your overall thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I thought it was great. Again, the ending with who was Ghostface could have been improved. I don't necessarily know how. I'm not the writer there, but I just wasn't left too excited with those guys being the choice. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it was a great movie, and I think it's one thing I'll add is um, just a shout out to Chad and his amazing survivor skills. There, I think that's going to be an interesting and fun if they keep that up in the next installments. Him being able to survive these pretty incredible attacks.
Yeah, he's almost kind of like the new Dewey, because like those first three movies, he's getting stabbed in the back every time and somehow surviving. But he is a cool character, and I don't hate that he's still alive. But after these two movies he's been in so far, the way he gets stabbed a whole bunch of times, it's like, come on, really? How is he still alive?
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I mean, this is it's a solid entry into the series. While I don't think it reaches the height of the original, I would probably say, I mean, I'm gonna have to watch it maybe one or two more times to know for sure. But I would say solidly, this is probably my second favorite in the series. I had last year's movie as my second favorite, or excuse me, 2022, or no, that was last year. I'm dumb. Anyway, yeah, I had that as my second favorite up until this point, but I think this one actually surpasses the last one because it not only pays homage to a lot of the stuff that the Scream series does well, but it does a lot that's different, that's not so different that it takes you out of the series and makes you miss anything that they're not doing. Like a lot of the better entries in this series, I think it plays the horror and comedy line very well, because the horror really works here, especially with a lot of that ramped up violence. But the comedy is still here. It's very funny. The jokes really don't stop throughout this movie. But thankfully, the jokes don't overtake any of the more serious parts either. So it's a good balance that it walks. And I like that this series, with the exception of maybe one or two movies, is able to do that very flawlessly, because it's really hard to do a comedy horror movie, and when you can do it well, I think it works really well, but when you don't exceed in it, it comes out pretty bad. So that's one of the better aspects of this series I've always liked. But yeah, this is a definite recommendation for me, and
yeah,
I would say, like I said, outside of the original, it's probably the best one in the series at this point.
Yeah, definitely my top three. I would say it's better than 5, and I'd have to really think about my ratings, but in between the first, second, and then this one, the sixth, I would say those are my top three, with the first one obviously being my first, and I'd have to think between this one and the second one for 2 and 3.
Yeah, the second one I kind of go back and forth on, because I do like it, but I think it suffers from being a direct sequel to the original. It came out less than a year after the original, so it feels very rushed, and it had a lot of script rewrites and things like that. And I personally think if they would have went with the original script, it would have been better. But that's a different movie for a different time, so kind of leave it at that. All right, well, yeah, that's about it from us, guys. If you have seen Scream 6, please let us know what you thought about it in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more reviews. And I will leave all my links down below on where you can follow me and check out more of my reviews. And until next time, I'll catch you all later.